In the early 1700s, England was a country in trouble. Years of fighting expensive wars had left the government owing a staggering amount of money, about £31 million. That might not sound like much today, but back then, it was an enormous sum. The country's leaders were desperate to find a way out of this financial mess. Enter John Blunt, a man with a plan. Blunt wasn't born into wealth or power. He was the son of a humble shoemaker, but he had a sharp mind for business and big dreams. By 1719, he had become one of the directors of a company called the South Sea Company. The South Sea Company had been created in 1711 with a grand purpose: to trade with Spain's colonies in South America. In reality, though, it did very little actual trading. Spain was protective of its colonies and didn't allow much foreign trade. But Blunt saw an opportunity to use the company for something else entirely. Blunt came up with a daring scheme. He proposed that the South Sea Company would take over the entire national debt of England. In exchange, the company would receive government bonds and special trading privileges. Then, the company would convert this debt into its own shares and sell them to the public. It was a complex plan, but Blunt explained it with such confidence that even King George R was convinced. The king not only approved the plan, but also became a major investor in the company. In January 1720, Blunt's proposal was presented to Parliament. There was some opposition at first, but Blunt had a trick up his sleeve. He quietly offered advance shares in the venture to influential members of Parliament and other powerful people. Seeing the potential for personal profit, many of these influential figures changed their minds and supported the plan. When the bill passed in April 1720, it set off a frenzy of excitement. The center of all this activity was a narrow street in London called Exchange Alley. This was where stocks were bought and sold, and soon it was packed with people from all walks of life, all eager to buy South Sea shares. At first, it was mostly the wealthy who bought shares. But as news spread of people making fortunes overnight, everyone wanted in on the action. Farmers dug up their life savings. Women, who didn't usually invest in stocks, began buying shares. Even servants and laborers scraped together what little money they had to buy a piece of the South Sea Company. The price of South Sea shares kept rising at an astonishing rate. In January, one share cost £128. By August, it had skyrocketed to £1,000. People were becoming rich beyond their wildest dreams, at least on paper. London was gripped by a fever of speculation. New, often absurd, investment schemes popped up everywhere. One company famously offered shares in a company for carrying on an undertaking of great advantage, but nobody to know what it is. Believe it or not, people actually bought shares in this mystery venture. Meanwhile, John Blunt was doing everything he could to keep the price of South Sea shares rising. He offered generous credit terms to buyers and promised huge dividends. He spread rumors about the vast riches waiting to be discovered in South America. He even bribed influential people to publicly praise the company. But as summer turned to autumn, cracks began to appear in this financial fantasy. Some investors, sensing that things couldn't continue like this forever, started to sell their shares. At first, it was just a trickle, but soon it turned into a flood. Panic set in. People rushed to Exchange Alley to sell their shares, but now nobody wanted to buy. The price of South Sea shares plummeted. By December, a share that had been worth £1,000 in August was now worth just £124. The consequences were devastating. Many people had borrowed money to buy shares, believing they would make a quick profit. Now they were deep in debt with nothing to show for it. Some wealthy families lost everything. There were reports of suicides as people couldn't cope with their losses. John Blunt, once hailed as a financial genius, now became the most hated man in England. He was stripped of his title and most of his wealth. He spent the rest of his life in obscurity, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked greed and speculation. The government had to step in to restore order. They investigated the South Sea Company and found widespread fraud and corruption. New laws were passed to regulate companies and prevent such a disaster from happening again. The South Sea Bubble, as it came to be known, left a lasting mark on English society and economics. It became a cautionary tale, a reminder that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Even today, over 300 years later, the story of the South Sea Bubble is still studied by economists and historians as an example of how greed and speculation can lead to financial disaster. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If anything resonated with you, feel free to drop your thoughts and personal stories in the comments below. Your input might just be the insight someone else needs. Here's something to keep in mind. Make a daily habit of learning something useful. Just like how you nourish your body with food, your mind needs nourishment too. Be deliberate about what you consume, because otherwise, the algorithm might start influencing your thoughts. Think about it. And hey, we're always open to welcoming subscriptions to our channel as donations to support our future upcoming projects and bring you top-tier content. Join our community by subscribing today.